Hi Roberto. Let's see, we're getting ready. Okay, we got Ali here. All right. Morning, Ali.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. It's so exciting to be talking. It's so amazing the way technology works that we can be talking from like almost opposite sides of the hemisphere, you know?
Yeah, literally. And you look so bright there. My God, here is already the evening. Everything is dark.
I have like windows open. Yeah, definitely lots of natural light is usually my go-to in these situations.
Right. Okay. So very excited for this. Thanks very much for joining me on this live session. I really, really, really appreciate Ali.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting. I haven't done one of these in a couple months, so I feel very flattered.
Okay. Well, I was really excited because not only I think that you being in the recruiting agency is a very right fit and a very right complement to what I'm, let's say, teaching or what I'm predicating on my Instagram and on my day-to-day business. But also you are a very accomplished professional. So I mean that only adds up to the interest of me having this session with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so having said that, I got here some notes and I'm gonna just go through it. So I'm gonna introduce you and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did a bit very light digging. And from what I can see, you have 9 years of experience in the recruiting agency. You're currently a director in culinary recruitment, quite specific. And as far as I can see, you have so far helped 1,300 job seekers into getting permanent positions and have conducted more than 11,000 interviews.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely I like to tally every year where I'm at. I just think it's something good to keep track of. And as we talk today, I think any job seeker, any professional should be keeping track of their metrics because it's a way to measure yourself and what you've done and what you've accomplished.
Absolutely. I mean, I would be lying if I tell you that I'm not keeping track of how many hours I have done with my clients. On one side, because I actually need to keep track because I need to measure my supervision sessions, but also, as you said, it's your metrics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being able, to say things like, since I started Ally Hires about a year and a half ago, but I didn't start taking clients until this year with COVID.
Hmm.
And within 6 months, I think I have worked with 80 clients. Having those sort of numbers, it's good because it lets people know you know what you're doing, you've had experience, you've been through multiple situations.
Hmm. Okay, so now we know a bit about you and your background. I know you're an accomplished professional, and I know you are the perfect person to be asking the questions that I have prepared for today. Um, so if you are happy with it, we just can click on if you're happy
Oh,
with it.
absolutely. Absolutely. I was make one small correction. I actually have done 9 years of recruiting, but half that time, 5 years, was actually on the corporate side. So I've done 4 years with agencies, and then half of it, and for anyone listening in, corporate recruiter is someone who actually works for the company. So when you apply to, a big name like Facebook, but even like a local company, the local grocery thing, and you hear back from somebody right away, it's usually someone in HR or a corporate recruiter. And that's somebody who works for the company who isn't like a third party. That said, I now work for an agency.
Okay. um, okay. I mean, no, that's very good because we wanted to tackle the two sides of the industry as well. Yeah. Okay, so the first question is a bit naughty, um, but it's a question that I know most of my clients have had in their head,
Yeah.
and it says we have this thing that recruiters have been, and I'm gonna dare to say, having a bad reputation. So I wanted you to give me your view of what a good recruiter is and how that is reflected on the recruiting agency. In the recruiting industry.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that old school mentality when you go back 20 years ago of recruiting and it's basically people are numbers and you're just filling slots. I think as a whole as society, we've progressed from there the same way the corporate world used to be, you know, like I feel like across the board, we're looking at so many other aspects and that's also reflected within recruiting. And I do feel like people have naturally progressed to a better point. I think that's why Ally Hires has been so popular because I preach at the pulpit of people, you know, like I always say, let's put the humanity back in hiring. So on a job seeker side, when you're communicating with a recruiter, you know, one thing to know is, you know, across the board, corporate, or if an agency, a lot of times it's one recruiter and they might be communicating with literally thousands of people at any time, you know, between all the applications coming in, especially during a time like COVID where many recruiting teams have been slashed and HR teams. And so it used to be a team of 7 and now it's one person doing the job, but they still have 20 openings and people applying for each and every one of those openings. So I would say it's less about, you know, I would say look at the quality of the communication you have with the recruiter. If you see them taking the time to really talk to you in an interview, are they making eye contact? Are they not distracted? You know, are they not late to the interview? You know, those things. They're not checking their phone. They're not, you know, checking emails while they're talking to you. Those are usually for me the sign of someone who they're investing in what they're doing because they are taking the time, whether that's for 30 minutes or an hour, to genuinely understand your skills, your background, whether you're the right fit for the position, but also what you're looking for and whether you'd be happy long-term in that role.
Okay, I mean that's ideally we would hope that we would always find that type of good recruiter.
Ideally.
Ideally, no, it's seriously. I really respect people who advocate for quality on recruitment. Unfortunately, I know that's not always the case. So it's good what you said, that you can test the waters and see how the other person is responding to the actual process. Okay, now I'm very interested in knowing how you guys handle your applications, and as you said, you might be handling 100 applications at the same time. So all those type of processes. So you know that we always talk about applicant tracking systems as a tool that you guys use. And we were discussing the other day that there might be some misconception on its use. So I would like you to give me your view on how this system works and what the commonality of their usage is.
Absolutely. It's honestly, I think one of the biggest misconceptions I see out there. And what I feel like happens, like sometimes I see, you know, people who are resume writers or career coaches and, you know, maybe they haven't worked on the HR or the recruiting side, and so they basically pick up articles that they've read that somebody else has chewed up information and popped down and they just repeat it, when I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions with ATSs. So at its core, an applicant tracking system is just a system just to collect those applications in, right? So that they're all in one spot so that we know, okay, all of these people applied to work at Hotel A and all of these people applied to work at Hotel B, or this person's applying for the engineering job versus this person's applying for front desk, let's say, to go with that hotel analogy. And so it's really just a way to collect the applications. Now, the misconception is that all of these ATSs have very advanced software where they're screening for certain words and pulling them out. And so you're only looking at 5 of the 100 applications, you know, when that is very rare. You know, the type of companies that can afford the software that is going to filter everything for you tends to be Fortune 100 companies, right? So we're talking tech, finance, we're talking Google, Facebook, we're talking the really big names. You know, they definitely, if you're applying those places, yes, make sure you have an ATS loaded resume, you know, but for the most part, you know, in the last almost decade I've been doing this, everywhere I've ever worked, we're going through every single application. And that's where people, I think, misconception is that they think it's a computer going through the applications with an ATS, when more often than not, it's actually a human physical being going through. That said, as many of us know, there's like a quote, like average recruiter looks at your resume for less than 30 seconds or something like that. That is very true, I will say, because there's so many people who apply to jobs that have zero relevance, zero qualification, that might have, you know, somebody's a cashier and they apply for a director of operations that requires 15 years experience, you know? So yeah, we glance at that and we're like, oh, no, never mind. You know, so those go fast. But I think the average, if you're somebody who hits at least 50% of the qualifications for a job, we're stopping, we're taking the time, we're taking a few minutes, we're going through line by line and taking a look, going, even if, okay, are they right for this position? Maybe not, but could they be good for another position that's maybe a junior level, you know? So I would say, I just saw somebody commented that we go through all our apps, you know, I'd say most recruiters go through every application. So you're getting eyes on those resumes. Also, a lot of times smaller companies, like your average Joe Schmo printing shop down the street with 5 locations, they don't have an applicant tracking system. Or if they do, it's basically like one email where everything gets filtered in, you know? So, I mean, you know, your small to mid-sized companies, I'd say you have to be a good mid-sized company, almost larger sized company, even just to invest, you know, invest in a $25,000 software, you know, to do your ATS system. Otherwise, you might be doing something that just like, it's basically Indeed, you know, where you're just having what, because Indeed is an ATS on its own. Like a lot of people use Indeed as an ATS, you know, because again, it just puts the applications in little piles for you.
Right. The other, I'm very interested in. It's good that we cleared out that about the misconception. I wanted to know, when you say that you go through all the applications, I want you to tell me more about that, because if you receive 100 applications and you need to schedule the interviews for the next week, what are you going to do? Are you going to go through every single one, or if you find the ones that you need, you're done?
So I'm the type where I don't like to get myself to the point that I have 100 applications. So in those situations, I'm usually taking, you know, I make a point to take 15, 20 minutes a day and go through all of my current openings to see what are the new applications. And I've seen that even in situations where maybe the recruiter has a coordinator or somebody else on the team who goes through the applications initially for them, they're still going through those applications every day. Because one thing that, you know, is so important in recruiting is, you know, if you don't communicate with somebody in the first 72 hours they've applied, there's a chance somebody else might have already snagged them up, you know? So for a lot of us, you know, I don't ever let myself get to the point I have 100. So it's more like I'm going through any new applications, if not daily, every other day, you know?
Right.
And that's an easier way to stay on top of it rather than feeling overwhelmed by a pile of 100 applications. That said, you know, there are, and this is such a very rare, there are very specific scenarios in the US with labor laws where if you have government contracts, you do actually have to go through per compliance measures, like a batch, like let's say 10 resumes at a time, because that way, instead of going through 100 and cherry picking and possibly discriminating, instead you're only going through 10 at a time. That way you're not discriminating based on, you know, you're doing them in the order chronologically they come in, rather than cherry picking the ones based on maybe last names or ethnic origins.
Yeah.
But that is like a 1% scenario, you know?
Mm-hmm. So in those cases, in the cases in which you're going to be, you know, following the day to day, and as you receive applications, you check them, would you say that the earlier you apply to a job, the more chances you have to land the interview?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 1,000. Because I feel like, you know, somebody might still have a conversation with you, or they might say, hey, you might get that email where like, hey, unfortunately, you know, we're already deep in the process, but we'd love to hold on to your application, you know? Because if they already have, let's say, 5 really great, amazing candidates going through second interviews, you know, there is only so much time. And I think one of the misconceptions is that one recruiter is working on one position when it's usually, one recruiter is usually working on, I think the lowest end I've ever had was 12 positions and the highest was 54. So yeah, mind you, I was working around the clock at that point. But I think that is, you know, unfortunately it's, you know, there is only, time is a finite resource, right?
Okay.
But yeah, the earlier you can apply, the better.
Perfect. That's a first getaway that we got, and I think it's very important. Um, Now, okay, so you receive your resumes, and let's say that a resume is ticking all your boxes. Is the one that it's actually you say, okay, this is one I'm gonna pass for an interview. How would the resume tick all your boxes?
So, that's tough because it really depends on the role, right? It depends on the job, what the requirements are. I would say these days education is less important actually than actual work experience. I found a lot of organizations and large organizations, the Fortune 500s of the world are getting away from doing educational requirements,
Hmm.
like where it might be highly preferred to have education, but it's not the end all be all. And I think a lot of people unfortunately do focus on like their education sometimes takes up half the page, before they get into their work experience versus these days people want to see relevant work experience. So I highly recommend, you know, so my biggest things, what I look for is if somebody includes numbers on their resume.
Hmm.
That is one of the most important things you include. So everyone always talks about don't just list your responsibilities, list accomplishments, but if you want to take that to the next level, include some numbers. So studies have shown that the eye naturally gravitates to numbers on a page or on a
Okay.
screen. And so if I have, let's say I have 10 great qualified resumes and I know we only have time to interview 8 of them, or whatever that number, let's say 5, the ones that have actual numbers reflected on the resume, like save the company $12,000 by streamlining XYZ, or increase sales by 22%, or reduce labor percentage, any of those. I once, I've literally helped somebody with their resume before that was like an admin assistant, but she had saved them something like, I don't know, I think it was come out to 6,000 a year in office supplies. And I was like, put that on your resume. It doesn't matter, you're young in your career. That's something somebody wants to see, that you take that initiative to think about those things. So numbers are probably the biggest thing you can do for yourself on a resume. And don't get me wrong, I know people sometimes will be like, well, I don't know those numbers. I don't know exactly. Go back and do the math, take the time, do the math, look back at, look at how many clients did you work with in the last year, and yeah, it might take you an hour and a half to do that, but that number reflected on your resume is going to carry you far. And honestly, a resume, anything you have on your resume is going to last you for a decade. So it's worth the hour and a half of your time,
I always recommend my clients to include the achievement sections, and I always tell them include achievements because it's how you go far and beyond from responsibilities. I said, um, and I don't say but, then I say and include numbers that give evidence of what you've been doing. And it's amazing. You were saying you were talking about a specific case, but they never understand that they will always have done something. They will always have done something that went above and beyond their responsibility. It's inevitable. It happens. Um, and and
Yeah. You're
yeah,
preaching
no,
to my
I was
choir
saying
right now.
it's how much they don't realize until you to let them know. You tell them, okay, so how many people did you have in reception at once? And how many people how many calls do you have to handle per second? And they would say, oh, well that's there you go, that's your
Yeah.
achievement.
One things I get a lot is people asking me like, hey, I'm looking to transition into HR or transition into recruiting, or hey, I just graduated college, I'm trying to find my first job. And I say, highlight those things you did in your past jobs, right? And I think sometimes it takes, like you said, a third party, whether it's a career coach or a resume writer, to kind of help put you in perspective, because they're thinking, well, I've never done it. And you're like, hold on, did you ever train anybody? Did you guys, let's say you worked at Bath and Body Works, which I don't know if that's a global brand, but it's a big one in the US. Let's say every season at Christmas, you helped hire 40 new hires seasonally and you helped train them. That's HR. You're doing interview process, you're doing onboarding, you're doing the I-9s, and then you're actually doing a training plan with them. That is tangible stuff you could put on your resume. And if you work there for 3 years, you can include the number, I've trained and hired over 120 seasonal associates. Boom. It's taking a critical look at what you've done and not undervaluing your experience, right? And that's something I think, long time people who've been in jobs a long time have a hard time seeing the value in themselves when they go out onto the market.
And it's I mean Lexi
Oh,
Bexi, Miss Lexi
I know,
Bexi is totally on board. Loving her.
Thanks.
um I think what we're saying is basically transferable skills are gems. I think gems is the word that was using Lexi Lexi in before. I'm using it now for this. And we don't realize that many times even our hobbies or things that we do externally can provide something, some add-on that can be valuable for future jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many there's so many ways we do little things that we don't realize we do. And if you're ever looking to pivot in your career or transfer industries or transfer professions, those are the things to focus on.
What else would you say? So we've talked about the numbers, which is something that it will you will glance through it and you will see the numbers. Is there anything else from a CV that you would say this is rocking my world?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, longevities, no gaps in employment, progression with titles. I think a lot of people have a tendency to put their highest title for a job. So let's say you work for an organization for 4 years and you ended as a senior manager, but you actually started with them as a supervisor. I actually rather see, broke it down on the resume, like supervisor 6 months, junior associate for a year and a half, manager for a year, and maybe you were only the senior manager the last 6 months. But to see that progression in someone's career, that for us on the other side means, wow, you're somebody who works hard. You're somebody who's moved up the ranks progressively. Any progression you can show in your career is great. But again, no gaps in employment. That's a big one. Even if that means if you left the industry you're in briefly. So let's say you work in, aeronautics and you decide to go to your family's coal mining business, for 2 years, put just an additional work experience on the bottom of the resume. That way, if we see there's a 3-year gap, we're going to question what happens and whether, there are times when I dig into in the interview process and I dig in and it turns out, yeah, there's a gap because they had 8 jobs in those 3 years. That's a huge red flag versus if we see on the resume, oh no, you just worked outside the industry for a couple of years, that's a little bit better, not even a little, that's immensely better. That's understandable.
Okay. No, and gaps is a question that I had many times in the past, and it came mainly from students saying, "I did a gap year. What do I do about it?" I said, "Well, put it there. What were you doing on your gap year? I'm sure you were not in your coach playing video games. I'm sure you were doing something. Well, put it in that."
Absolutely. If you're able to say additional experience, and let's say it is a student, they put gap year, traveled to XYZ, interned XYZ, or did temporary seasonal work, you could definitely do that on a resume. And that explains like, hey, you took that gap year to really explore your options, explore the opportunities out in the world. We see that in my industry on the hospitality restaurant side with chefs. It's very common for them to do stages, which is basically seasonal work. And many times they will, take a year, like maybe they work for about 4 years and they take a year to travel the world, learn how other people do things. And that's immensely valuable. That's not a discredit. Include it on the resume.
Perfect. That's good. We're aligned. I'm doing the right things. Right. Okay. So let me just. Yes. Okay. So many times, and this perhaps comes more with the personality, but many times my clients, they are hesitant of chasing recruiters in the times like, okay, they had a conversation on the phone, or they had the first interview and they haven't heard from them in a week. And say, what should I do? Well, just call them or send them an email. Can you give your view about that?
Absolutely. So first I'm going to say the worst thing you can do if you apply for a job, do not then go in the next hour to sending the person a LinkedIn message, finding their work email on LinkedIn and emailing them. And sometimes you find their work, a lot of recruiters will include their work number and then calling them. If you contact me 4 times an hour after applying, there's a good chance I'm not going to consider you. And the reason why is because that shows poor judgment skills. And at the level I work at, which is salaried positions, it'd be different if somebody was in an hourly role, but at a salaried level, that's a key indicator of your judgment skills, and that's not good judgment. So do not do that. More appropriately, it would be if you apply for a job, I'd say wait 3 to 4 days, business days. So another thing I see sometimes is people will apply Friday at 8 p.m., Monday at 6 in the morning. I have an email saying, "Hey, I think you're back from you," and I applied over the weekend. Again, it's unfortunately it's poor judgment skills. Like you understand they probably didn't work over the weekend, or if they did, it's probably high priority things. So I do recommend 3 to 4 business days on following up. And then after that, once you interview, I would say, a good thing to ask at the end of interviews is, when they ask you, oh, what sort of questions do you have? I always recommend my 2 are, ask about like, oh, do you guys offer benefits, or what does that look like? So you're looking at the total compensation package, not just a salary. But the other thing to ask would be, fantastic, do you guys have a timeline on your hiring? Or, and that was a great opportunity because they might be able, you're opening the door for them to say, yeah, unfortunately you actually are our first interview. And, I know our VPs love to interview at least 5 to 10 people. So I have to be honest, it might be a week or 2 before we're able to loop back. You're opening the door by asking that question. So I always recommend at the end of an interview asking like, oh, what's your timeline on hiring for this role? And then they might say, oh, we're actually not opening for 3 months, so nobody's gonna be starting for 6 weeks. That's something you want to know if you need a job ASAP, But then I'd say, like, so let's say you've interviewed, I would say after about a week, or if you interviewed on a Monday, the end of the week on that Friday. So I'd say about 5 business days is appropriate. And following up at the end of the week. And it's just like, and by the way, actually, let me look back. After an interview, you should send a thank you email. For me, it is not highly critical. However, I have definitely seen leaders, executives pass on people because they did not send a thank you note within the next 2 days. And I know it is silly for me and it drives me nuts, but I'll tell you, that is the reality. When I worked on the corporate side, I definitely had a couple executives that were like, well, they did send me a thank you thing and I gave them my business card. Did they send you one? Okay, then no, they're out. So I do send a thank you. Like, it was great chatting with you. But at the end of the week, follow up and just loop back with a friendly, like, hey, I really enjoyed chatting with you on Monday. I definitely look forward to hearing about next steps. The biggest thing is keep it brief. Don't do more than maybe 3 to 4 sentences. If there was some sort of personal connection in the interview, let's say you both went to the same alma mater, or you're both from the same area, or let's say you, on any level, you guys clicked on something in the interview. It's always nice to mention that because it shows you were listening, you're detail oriented. So it's a nice little tie. And if you're like, oh, I hope you have a great time. I don't know if the interview said, hey, I'm going out of town, so I won't be able to follow up for a week. That's a great time to be like, oh, I hope you had a great trip. But you want to keep it at 3 to 4 sentences max. You do not want to send them a 5-paragraph essay, like breaking down all the reasons you're so perfect for the job. You don't want to do that. But I recommend, follow up at the end of the week. And if, and then I would give them about 3 days to answer you. If you do not hear back for any reason, I would then wait another maybe 3 to 5 business days and then follow up. And all you have to say is, hey, just checking in on this opportunity. I want to let you know I'm still remain interested. Is there anything else I can provide you?
Yeah.
That question right there, and it's three sentences again, but is there anything else I can provide you is probably, it's such an easy way that if you're speaking to a recruiter or someone in HR who's early in their career, they lack confidence, they don't know what to do when they're in a situation where they don't have any updates. I feel somebody in my role, like, I'm just honest, like, hey buddy, I'm so sorry. We haven't heard back from the client. I want you to know I haven't forgotten about you over here. Thanks for checking in. But somebody I definitely see, it's like in dating, right? Like people in their teens and early 20s, they're going to ghost you versus the people that are, older, kind of have a little bit more knowledge and just maturity to be okay telling you when there isn't good news or no news. So when you ask, is there anything else I can provide you? It really does open the door for somebody who's unfortunately the less experienced recruiter or HR person to say, oh yeah, could you send me over your references? Or, oh no, don't worry, we don't need anything. I don't have any updates. It's this really great question. It is probably one of those valuable questions somebody could say, which is just, is there anything else I could provide for you?
Look, I mean, that's fantastic because you are giving recommendations for totally different reasons to the ones that they usually give. And it's amazing because you're saying that many times the decision comes from, did they send a thank you note? And in my case, I say, well, send a thank you note because you build
Absolutely.
rapport with a person. You have to have a connection at some level, and people, normally you stay in the back of their mind. So it's better to do it that way. By the
Yeah.
way, before I carry on, somebody asked if this is going to be saved. Definitely, this recording is going to be saved,
Oh,
and we'll upload it
good.
onto our respective Instagrams. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Uh,
feel like just last thing on the thank you notes, I feel like thank you notes are it almost feels like a cliche at this point, like, oh, send a thank you note after. But I really do have to say those quick thank you emails, as I said in that example, like it can really be a make or break, even though I don't think like, I'm like, oh, that was nice, but like, it doesn't mean anything for me. Like for some executives, it actually is that thank you note after an email, like that email it can be a make or break. It really can, unfortunately, as petty as it seems.
and it's easy. It's you don't waste much time doing it. So it's easy and it's it's not complicated to be
3 or 4
nice.
sentences. Exactly. Just 3 or 4 sentences. Do not send a 5-paragraph cover letter. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah. uh, okay. So the next question I have is regarding interviews. Now, interviews. You've done 11,000 interviews, but most of job seekers they haven't done that many, of course, and some have done two, one, or maybe none. And interviews are or feel like daunting to most of people. Um, can you give a view from your side of the table on what you would be expecting from the job seekers to provide during those interviews, and what would be your recommendation to them?
absolutely. Listen, I've been through bad interviews too, right? Like, there is nothing worse as a job seeker than sitting down with someone who is distracted, they're not paying attention, or you realize the moment you sit down with them within 3 minutes, you're like, oh, this is not a fit. Like, I've had interviews where, and I can think of one interview in particular where I had a phone interview where I knew inside 3 minutes I could never work for this person. Like, she was a horrible person. The way she communicated was very abrasive. I'm a really nice person. Like, I'm like, oh, this is not a fit for me either. So it's okay. So believe me, the biggest thing I can tell, the most empowering thing I can tell job seekers is to remember the interview is as much for you as it is for them. Like, I feel like, and it's so tough. If you haven't interviewed in 10 years to put yourself back out there, like, I get it, like, and I don't think most recruiters or most HR people are looking for someone to be perfect in interviews. I think what we're looking for, and something to keep in mind is, at the end of the day, is this someone we want to work with? Like, I highly recommend, I feel so bad sometimes when I've been in situations where I've interviewed somebody and I could not break through to them. And I'm really nice. Like, I go really out of my way to connect with people, to get a smile out of them at some point in an interview. But there's some people that are so uptight, that are just so closely guarded, that I know if they can't connect with me, then I have concerns for them, depending on the role, right? If they're an engineer, they're a scientist, if they don't need to work on a team, if they're an individual contributor, that's less of a concern. But if they're in any sort of team dynamic, or they're interacting with guests or clients, then my concern in interview is, like, if you can't smile once for me, then oh my God, what's going to happen when you're dealing with actual people? Like, so the best thing I can recommend is, even if you have to force a smile at some point, like, just smile. If the interviewer cracks a joke, like, at least try to get a smile out of it, because chances are, if it's a cheesy joke, it's just because they're trying to, like, loosen you up in some way. Or, I always start interviews informally. Like, for me, I started them like, oh, great. If it's these days it's COVID, so nobody's doing anything in person. But it used to be that I'd be like, hey, how's the drive over? Oh God, how's parking? I know parking in LA is really bad. Were you able to find some with my directions? And it's just like, it's a natural way to start, right? But the biggest thing in interviews I can recommend is, smiling, answering honestly. Anyone who's been doing this for more than 3 or 4 years recruiting knows when you're BSing us. Like, I know pretty fast. And I also catch on, I actually had this really recently where somebody it was a little painful because I had to ask them a few follow-up questions to kind of get to the truth of the matter when it wasn't a big deal. They had gotten furloughed because of COVID, right?
Right.
And I think people are so afraid to say, first of all, if you've gotten furloughed or laid off because of COVID, do not say you were let go from your job. Like, being let go from your job gives the impression you were fired. There's a big difference. Like, if you got furloughed or laid off from COVID, then you see that. There's nothing to be ashamed about that. That is out of everybody's control right now and out of everybody's hands. It is no reflection on your performance. But if you're in an interview and you're trying to portray that you're still employed and you're not, and it comes out by the end like I've rooted out, then unfortunately that's a red flag for me that you were obstructing the truth or trying to, you know what I mean? Like, that makes me then question other answers you give me, that you're just going to say something to sound right rather than being honest. And that's not going to get you anywhere in the interview process. So just talk about being authentic, being genuine, of course, have some questions that you're prepared for, but also, speak like you're talking to a human being, I definitely know when people have given me the rehearsed, like they read an answer off the internet.
People do that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I
but
know. Try to put your own flavor or spin on it, treat it like a conversation. That's one of the best things I can describe.
And I know what you mean. I do recommend my clients to prepare the typical questions because some of them are gonna come. And you're going to have behavioral questions and you're going to have situations. Okay, so what would you do in this situation? So prepare a bit. It might not be the exact question. Perhaps it's the same question, but you're not going to memorize your answer. Just practice it a bit, absorb the information, make sure that you own it, and then reproduce it with different words or how you're feeling at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, my last tip on interviews, the last thing I could say, and this is a little harder, but if you can make somebody laugh in an interview, like, the job is yours. Like, I always say, if you can mention numbers and if you can make them laugh, you're golden. That's it. Like, I literally, this is like my proven strategy at this point for years now. Like, and one of the best ways to do that is, I hate the question, tell me about your weakness and your strength, but I know like 90% of interviewers do ask that. And a great way to do that is when they ask you, what's your weakness? Use a little self-deprecating humor, say something like, for me, I always laugh and I go, oh, that I'm a bit of an emotional eater. So if I'm stressed, you'll see me going to the break room at 3 p.m., and almost, yeah, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of funny when, like, sometimes you've been very professional and you kind of crack up for a second. You're like, well, my real weakness is emotional eating. But if we're going to be interview serious, for me, it's probably the fact that, I can get overinvested in what I do, and I am a little bit of a workaholic. So I do sometimes have a hard time, and then I might give a real genuine answer. But infusing that humor, again, at the end of the day, like, the person interviewing, good chance they're going to have to work with you in some capacity. Like, we all want to work with people we don't mind bumping into in the water cooler instead of like hiding from them, like, because I've hid from people. I've literally ducked behind a cubicle to avoid someone in an office before. So I'm going to hire people I would like to chat with,
And that makes total sense. I mean, if you build up that confidence, and there's something that you don't know about me actually, Ali, and is that in my past life, I wasn't a recruiter, but I did have to recruit people for my team. And it's many times I think there was in 3 occasions that I was involved in the recruitment process. Most of the times it was like, who was a right fit?
Yeah.
And what's a right fit? Is that skills? Is that most of the times it was, well, we think that this person would fit well with our team. And that's a fact, because you see different people that have very similar skills, very similar experience, but are they a right fit for the team? Are they going to work well with the rest of the team? The decision most of the times was along those lines.
Absolutely. I'd rather take somebody who hits 80% of the requirements, maybe doesn't have something that we need, like hits 80% of it and seems like an absolute joy to work with and seems like they have a good work ethic, then go with somebody who hits 100% of it but seems like a jerk. To be really honest, I mean, I'm going to take the nice one. Let's be real.
Okay, I got. I mean, of course, I have lot. I always have questions, but I think these were like the general questions that I wanted to cover. We did have an agreement for this session, and is that we were going to do a live demonstration, I guess, if we or exercise, if we want to call it. Um, so the idea was that you, as an interviewer, you know your behavioral questions or the typical questions that you like to ask, and I, as a coach, I would like to know that I know how to recommend my clients how to answer them. So we're gonna put that to the test.
Perfect.
I think more than a test. It's so the idea is you're gonna fire the questions. I'm gonna try to answer them in the best of my knowledge, and then you'll tell me what were you intending with a question, what you wanted to get from me, and I think that can be a very good demonstration for the people who are watching.
Perfect. Well, then I will give you my first question, and this is something I ask usually some form of this question with almost everyone I interview, depending on the role, and I kind of swap out. But what I'd ask you is, can you tell me about a time that you disagreed with a decision your client was making, and how did you handle that?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if I have to talk from the perspective of a coach, which is my most recent experience, yeah, definitely. There have been a couple of times, I guess, that I have disagreed. But before I answer your question, I just want to clarify something. As a coach, we are supposed not to be judgmental. So sometimes I will not agree with a client, but I would let it go because it's within their beliefs and values.
Perfect. That is a perfect answer. That right there is actually a perfect. That is a perfect answer, because what I'm looking for is whether somebody gives an actual scenario that happened or they give a general scenario like that, it's the idea that you understand where the other person is coming from, and you're explaining your thought process, right? So you just saying the clarifying statement, you almost don't even need to go into a scenario, because that alone right there, perfect, because you understand where they're coming from, and you want to make sure the decision they make is best for where they're at in their life right now. And, let's say I'm talking to a marketing person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I might ask them, can you tell me about a time, if let's say they're a corporate marketing person, tell me about a time that you disagreed with a decision, your superior made, your boss made, and I'm looking for something similar where they might be like, well, there were definitely times where, maybe I thought this would probably be the better direction, but, she has more experience than me and she's been with the company longer. And I respect that, this is something I can learn from. And maybe that's an area that I could be more like, or something, however, or I'll ask, tell me how you disagree with a guest, or tell me how I disagreed with, if it's a executive and you have clients, or you're an account person, same thing, where essentially that understanding that you don't need to be right in every situation. And I will tell you right now, 70-80% of people answer that question well, but there's like 20 to 30% like sliver that it becomes very clear that they do not deal well with. They're like, well, no, I felt like this was the right thing, and this is what we should do, and they didn't agree with me. And so I went to their boss and I sent a letter, and I'm like, oh my God, that is horrible. Like, that is going over people's heads. Like, I mean, and yeah, I'm sure we've all been in really bad scenarios, but like in an interview, don't give the worst case scenario you've ever been in a job. I mean, I've had someone tell me they've been punched. I've heard some pretty crazy things in interviews. But by the way, I love your comment section right now. Like, your comment section through this whole live has been so on fire. I just want to say, everyone in the comments, please DM me, because I'm talking so I can't see all of them, but I definitely want to say hi to all of you. But no, that was perfect. The other BBI question that I was going to ask, this is a good one. Can you tell me about a time that you were given a project or an assignment that you didn't have a lot of clear details on, a little ambiguous? How did you proceed without clear direction?
Right. Okay, let me think. So I have been given times in which a project at the beginning was not very clear, like all the details were not clear. To be fair, like most of projects, I think. And I guess what you have to do is make assumptions and take risks as well. You have to evaluate the risks of the project. The other thing that I like to do is to make sure that I have means to clarify the situation. Because normally when you go through the process that I've been going, you get to certain governance points in which you will have to demonstrate or to give as much information to the executive directors for them to make a decision whether are we going to chase this or not. So carrying on with the project with information that I had, making assumptions, making sure that I had some wheels rolling in order for me to clarify certain points, in order to bring more information to the mix, and at the end be able to give as much information as possible to the directors for them to be able to make how it's called, an informative decision. Is that?
Yeah, an informed decision. Absolutely.
An informed decision. There you go.
Yeah, perfect. I think one of the skills that employers are looking for most right now, especially at a time where people are working remotely, is the ability to, it's A, critical thinking, but it's B, the ability to work in ambiguous situations. Somebody who's versatile, somebody who, again, this is where maybe about 60 to 70% people answer this one well, versus there is this definite chunk of 30 to 40 where, especially I used to ask this a lot more in my last corporate role, because we were an organization that was growing, where sometimes it was like, great, I need you to run with this, and of course you might have one or two questions, but there are some people and there's some personalities, like I'm big on Enneagrams. So Enneagram 1s, for example, like they love to have order. They want clear direction. They want things broken down for them piece by piece. This is what you need to do, and that doesn't work for every organization, like there are, and don't get me wrong, that actually works great for people who are micromanagers. So on the flip side, if I know I'm hiring for a job where I know someone's a little bit of a micromanager, I actually am looking for someone who is like comfortable being told exactly what to do for a project, versus most organizations, especially when you're working from home, where during COVID, I started a new job while from home, and, it is definitely a whole new ball game when you can't just like pop into someone's office and be like, hey, I'm so sorry, do you mind showing me how to do this again? Versus now you're at home going, what the hell? Like, you're just like, I gotta figure this out, So, I think the ability to, like you said, like where it's, sometimes you have to make some judgments, and you have to go with the best possible. And that's part of why people are hiring you, for that expertise, that knowledge, that decision making, to be able to keep the process going, instead of just saying, oh, well, no, I didn't do anything. I didn't hear back from you, so I just kind of waited. And then they're like, well, what have you been doing this whole time? Or why didn't you follow up? And so the ability to work in ambiguous situations is huge. So that's why I asked that behavioral based interview question, because it's very insightful for me. And it's also insightful for me if I loved someone, and that's the one area, to be able to go back to the hiring manager or to say, like, so this person's amazing, like, great attitude, they have this experience. There's just one thing that I'm a little on the fence with, and that's, I asked them about their ability to deal with ambiguous situations, and it does sound like, they might need a little bit more guidance in, when they start out, which anybody does. We all need training in everything. And it depends on the hiring manager whether that works or not, to be honest. Like, sometimes, and this is where there's that rightness of fit, like, I don't want to put somebody in a situation, a job seeker, where in 6 months they're going to come back to me and be like, oh my God, Ally, this is horrible. Like, like, at the end of the day, like, I want to make sure the job fit. Sometimes if you don't get a job, it's nothing wrong with you. It's just, like, it might not be that you're not qualified. It might not be that we know you would not be happy in 6 months in this role, and that's one of those situations, especially when I know I have a micromanager, and those exist.
Are we talking about recruitment, or are we talking about matchmaking? I'm getting lost.
Right? I know. I mean, that's what on some level it all is, right?
Would it be nice if there were programs like Blind Date, but for recruitment? Like,
right?
the manager and the candidates don't see each other, but they have to answer each other questions.
That's a question, right? Chat roulette for managers for hiring. But yeah, I'd say those are probably my two favorite behavioral based questions. I can't think of, I'm trying to think of one off the bat. Those are the two I had definitely prepared, but I will say one thing I look out for, and for anybody listening in for interview advice, the biggest red flag that comes up quite a bit for me with people is people who need constant validation in an interview. Like, they need someone to give them a pat on the shoulder, a pat on the back the whole way through the interview. Like, if you use phrases like, well, yeah, I mean, it really just came down to me. I was doing everything, you know, and you do that for repeated jobs where you never acknowledge anyone you ever worked with or on a team. You never say, oh yeah, you know, a situation where there was a tight-knit team of 4 of us, and unfortunately the boss left, so I picked up more responsibility, but you know, I couldn't have done it without the rest of the team. You know, that is a great answer. If you're like, oh no, the boss left, it was really me. I mean, yeah, there were a couple other people, but I mean, I did everything. You know, like, that means you're the type of person who needs validation. You want me to say in the interview, oh really? Like, good for you. You know, if you're looking for that constant
Look at you.
yeah, I will tell you right now, those are usually the people in the workplace that are constantly disgruntled, like, where they feel like if they don't get enough praise, like, they feel underappreciated all the time. And it depends on the role. You know, if it's with a hiring manager where I know the person they report to is only going to check in with them once a month, like, that might not be enough for them, you know. And I have to be really honest, anytime that comes up in an interview and I share that feedback with an executive or a leader, like, that for them is always a passing point. If they think for a moment it's someone who can't work independently on their own without constant, like, praise and feedback, you know, like, don't get me wrong, I think most leaders are good about, you know, being like, hey, great job on that project, or hey, you're doing really good at this, you know. But there's certain people who need that constant, and it comes through in the interview. I can pick it up right away.
Let's say I'm gonna give you the advice that I give most of my clients, because I may have one or the other. I do completely agree that if you have been working with a team, you have to demonstrate that you actually have been working with a team, and you have been able to be capable to produce results within a team. But I also say there's many times in which people keep on answering the question, we did, we accomplished, yeah, hold on, what did you do? There are things that are your accomplishments, so you don't water them down by keep on saying we because you feel insecure. So I always say, have a balance between both of them.
And that might be a question where, you know, a common one is, you know, tell me about, you know, a major project or accomplishment you had during your time with XYZ company. You know, and you might say, yeah, you know, as a team, we worked together and we were able to increase sales by 72%. Personally, I was able to contribute I created this certain SOP or this system. And, you know, I think you can definitely delineate where you personally contributed versus, I will say, at some point in the interview, you have to give credit to other people you've worked with. Yeah. If it's constantly though, it definitely resonates.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Ali, I have another question about, actually, this is a personal experience I had, and that was, I think, 5 years ago. I went through a process. I was looking for a next step in my career, and I went through a job process of 7 interviews.
Oh no! I'm so sorry. That's horrible.
And you know what the result was?
Oh God, you didn't get the job after 7 interviews. I shouldn't laugh, but that is the worst case scenario, right?
It was horrible, and it's funny because I was doing 2 different interviews for 2 different job positions at the same time, and the lady, the recruiter at the other end, she was like, "Look, I mean, if you are on your 7th interview, it looks like they don't really like you, or they don't really know what they want."
And absolutely, I think if you're in a situation where, oh gosh, that sort of interview is happening, it's usually because it could be a company that's growing. And so they're growing fast, so they're not exactly sure what they need. And usually for me, that's a bad sign on leadership, because it really does mean that leadership is conflicted on what do we really need? Who do we really want? Also, on the flip side, it sometimes, like, you know, I've definitely been a part of an organization where when I came initially on board, almost everybody was interviewing with like 5 or 6 people. Granted, I usually would be able to get it down to only 2 or 3 days worth of interviews, you know, that way, like, I really try to respect people's time, but I definitely had to put my foot down pretty, like once I established myself in the first 90 days to be able to push back and say, listen, we are losing good people. People are taking jobs. People are dropping out of the interview process because we don't need all these people. And if you don't trust, if you need to have every VP interview somebody when they only report to one VP and yet the other three are interviewing them, like, you don't trust the decision-making skills of your top leaders, you need to take a close look at your organization. And that's something to keep in mind for the job seeker. And I know it's so tough if it's, especially if it's a really cool job or it's something that you would really love to do, you know, and so you kind of hold out. But it's something that you have to take a step back as a job seeker and assess the company too. Like, what does this say about them? And even if that means, especially if you do have a recruiter as your point of contact, being able to ask them, you know, hey, can you give me some insight into why? Or, you know, that's why I think it's so important the first interview to ask, you know, hey, what does the hiring process look like? Or what is your timeline? Because if you're working with a solid organization who knows what they're looking for, they're going to say to you, yeah, it's going to look like, you know, so obviously first initial conversation with me, and then there's going to be an interview with the director, and then likely their superior. You know, for this role, maybe there's a practical of some sort. You know, for a chef, it might be a tasting. For a marketing person, it might be a presentation. That might be your third step, your final step, you know. And if they can give you a clear, like, yeah, we do require 4 steps, but boom, 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 here's what it looks like. Like, you know, going into it, what it looks like, rather than, yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, next you're probably going to interview with so-and-so. Maybe, you know, you can tell the difference if somebody's confident and they know exactly what's going on, you know.
And actually, actually that's what I normally did in the past, saying, okay, so how do you say? And in that specific occasion, the recruiter was always saying, oh yeah, it looks like this is going to be the last interview, and then they would call me for another one. And somebody in the comments have actually nailed the answer. I learned from the recruiter afterwards that there were 2 hiring managers, and there was one that liked me, and the other one didn't like me. And the one that liked me was the one leaving the company, and the one that didn't like me was the one coming into the role. And that's the reason why they called me 7 times, because one despised me and the other one loved me.
Gosh, and that in no way, you as a job seeker are not going to be set for success, no matter how you. I feel like you can't win in that scenario. And that's why I say it's especially even when you don't know the reason why, being able to take a step back and go, okay, if this feels fishy, it probably is. And this is where it comes in. And I always say that the interview process is as much for you as it is for them. And I remember when my little sister was looking for a job at one point, and she shared with me, she interviewed with 2 people in a group interview, right? And one person she loved and the other she was like, oh. And the person she didn't care for as much is the person she would have been like the senior person who was really running the team. And I remember telling her, like, if you don't love somebody in an interview, you don't want to work there. Like, you know, take that, I don't know how to say this, but take that power back. Like, you know, if you didn't feel a connection in the interview, and don't get me wrong, I realize, like, not every interview you're going to feel like, wow, you know, I want to go work with this person, but you should feel some sort of like, oh, that was great. I could learn from them. There has to be a benefit for you as well, you know? So if you feel like, oh, I'm kind of afraid of them, or, oh, we just didn't click, you know, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm seasoned enough in my career. I don't want to work anywhere where I don't feel excited to work with the team.
Yeah, I mean, in the ideal scenario, I guess that would be what people would do if you were able to choose. Say, okay, I don't need this. I don't need this. If I'm gonna move to somewhere where I like to work. Then absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, it's so important. And I think, I don't know if it was with you that we were saying that 75% of what makes you want to work in a place is the people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That wasn't me, but I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's the people, right? Like, that's a big reason, you know, or for me, it's to learn. Like, I really want to, like, an area where I can still learn, still grow, that I can feel personally rewarded in what I do. Like, I've done agency, then I did corporate. I did a couple corporate organizations, and now I'm back to an agency. And, you know, I mean, I'm feeling like you're in a situation where, for me, making an impact is important. You know, my boyfriend could care less about that. You know, like, everyone has their own motivations with why they work, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ali, we have just kicked the last minute of the of the live. Thanks very much for joining me on this. It was very informative. I really liked it. I think I'm gonna, when I upload the video, I'm gonna take notes and probably base future stories and posts on this because
Oh, wonderful.
no, really, there was lots of good material that I think we can extract from this. And again, I really appreciate you joining me. You're a great person to talk to. So I envy anyone that has an interview with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I actually, the funniest thing is while we've been on here, I actually saw somebody I hired at one point popped in to see the comments, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And it's someone that I loved and adored. I actually bumped into him through completely like and just bumped into him in town. Like, you know, it was so great to see him. But yeah, no, I thank you so much for having me. And a major shout out to everyone in the comments. Like, just Lexi in particular and Kim, like, we're just killing it. Like, I enjoyed seeing their comments coming through. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good day.